Let's just dive right into this explainer. If you've been following the news lately, you've absolutely seen the headlines about crime spiking in major cities. Today, we're going to bypass all the usual political talking points and look right under the hood of our urban justice system to diagnose exactly why these spikes actually happen. It's really like looking at a complex piece of machinery.
I mean, just listen to the staggering number. We're talking about a 186% increase in the young black male homicide rate in Washington, D.C., and that's just from 2014 to 2023. While a lot of other cities actually saw violent crime retreat a bit after the surges we saw in 2020, our nation's capital experienced this historic spike in murders. It literally rendered the city an outlier. Sadly, it became roughly as dangerous to be a young black man in the district recently as it was, a full 25 years ago.
So when you hear numbers like that, we really have to ask ourselves, when a city gets hit with a drastic rise in crime, are we looking at a failure of policy? Like, are the laws just too lenient? Or is it actually a mechanical breakdown of the justice system itself? Basically, are we dealing with bad rules or just a broken engine?
That brings us to Part 1, Anatomy of a Crime Spike, using DC as our primary case study.
Now, there's this really crucial concept we need to talk about called the law of crime concentration. Because crime isn't just spread out evenly across the city like a blanket, right? It is hyper-concentrated. For instance, lethal group violence and homicides are intensely clustered in very specific areas, like Ward 8 and Ward 7 in D.C. But meanwhile, your petty thefts and property crimes, those absolutely dominate the central commercial hubs like Ward 2. So to fix a crime spike, we've got to realize we aren't fighting one giant monolithic crime wave. We're fighting very distinct types of crime happening in very specific, concentrated pockets.
And here's another totally distinct problem: a massive surge in carjackings. But get this, unlike the homicides, which are largely driven by adult gang conflicts, 65% of carjackings in the district are actually committed by juveniles, totally separate from adult gang violence. Alarmingly, one youth even compared the impulsive thrill of stealing cars to playing Grand Theft Auto in real life. Yeah, GTA IRL. Some are even live streaming these crimes on social media, which is just wild.
Okay, let's move on to Part 2, the capacity collapse. This is where we look at the mechanical failure side of things. To really get this, we've got to totally strip away the politics and look at the criminal justice system purely as an engine. And like any engine, it needs enough operational capacity to actually run. We call this the capacity view. It's basically measuring the total volume of manpower, attention, space, time, and resources that a city can actually dedicate to keeping people safe. So when crime shoots up, it's very often because this baseline capacity has simply mechanically shrunk. And we can see exactly how this engine has shrunk since 2020. For starters, police staffing in DC hit a half-century low, dropping by 12%. But hey, it's not just the police. Think about the U.S. Attorney's Office, which handles most of the adult prosecutions in D.C. Before 2020, they were prosecuting about 2/3 of all felonies. By 2022, that dropped to prosecuting less than half of them. Arrests plummeted, prosecutions plummeted, and that swift, certain consequence for committing a crime basically evaporated.
But this capacity collapse goes way beyond just law enforcement. It bleeds right into our public schools. Schools act as this incredible natural deterrent and guide for kids, keeping them off the streets. But chronic truancy, which means 10 or more unexcused absences, shot up to nearly 40% in D.C. public schools after 2020. That's a massive failure in the educational system's ability to engage and guide these kids before they end up, say, committing those impulsive carjackings we were just talking about.
We're also seeing the gears grinding to a halt in the courts and city services. Recently, 13 out of 62 D.C. Superior Court judgeships were just left vacant. That causes massive backlogs and delays trials indefinitely. And right at the exact same time, the city's municipal capacity to clear unsheltered encampments dropped, which allowed visible public disorder to really spike. Everywhere you look, the system is just being forced to do less with less.
Right, let's look at solutions in Part 3, Restoring Traditional Justice Capacity.
So how do we rebuild this engine? Well, we need some very specific mechanical steps. First up, using federal grants like COPS funding to aggressively boost hiring and fill those half-century lows in police staffing. Second, we really need to prioritize professional development. The data shows a lot of officers are resigning within their first 7 years, so offering educational development can be a huge factor in preventing that early burnout. And third, civilianizing administrative roles. Basically, take sworn officers out of desk jobs in HR, replace them with civilian staff, and boom, you immediately have more trained officers back out on street patrol where they're needed.
All of this feeds into a highly targeted strategy known as problem-oriented policing, Remember that law of crime concentration we talked about? Well, in DC, just about 500 identifiable individuals drive 60 to 70% of all the gun violence. It's a tiny network. By taking that restored police manpower and concentrating it directly on those high-risk individuals, and specifically on the top 10% of city blocks where the crime actually happens, a city can massively drop its violent crime rate without having to heavily police the entire population. It's about working smarter.
Now, let's explore the other side of the coin in Part 4, Alternative Community Response Models.
Check this out. Up to 20% of all 911 calls across the country are actually for acute mental or behavioral health crises, not violent crimes. So sending out armed police officers to these specific calls is often a pretty inefficient use of those already scarce police resources. Plus, it can sometimes lead to unnecessary arrests or missed opportunities to just get someone the medical treatment they actually need.
To fix this, philanthropies like Arnold Ventures and various researchers are testing some incredibly innovative alternative crisis response models. You've got programs like Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, or the STAR program in Denver. Instead of sending armed officers to behavioral health calls, they dispatch trained medics and mental health clinicians. And the early evaluations are super promising. These community responder models are successfully reducing arrests for minor offenses while directly connecting people to the health services they need.
And when it comes to addressing that highly concentrated group violence, cities are turning to what are called credible messengers. These are widely accepted community members, very often former gang members or folks who have served time themselves, who actively step in to mediate conflicts. Take the Agape movement in Minneapolis, for example. They use these credible messengers to intervene in interpersonal squabbles and de-escalate tensions, totally without the threat of arrest. It's about fundamentally changing the community norms around violence from the inside out.
Now, for local commercial hubs that are getting hit hard by property crime and general disorder, business improvement districts, or BIDs, are a really powerful tool. These are public-private partnerships where local businesses actually pool their own money to fund local security, street cleaning, and pedestrian amenities. They essentially step up to restore physical order in places where the municipal capacity might be stretching a bit thin.
And the data on these bids is actually incredibly compelling. A study out of Los Angeles showed that bids significantly drop per year robberies by 12% and violence by 8%. Get this, the social cost benefit of reducing those robberies essentially pays for the entire bid budget itself. That's a huge win. But there is one caveat we have to mention. These safety benefits don't usually spill over into the adjacent neighborhoods that don't have a bid.
Okay, let's bring all this together in Part 5, Building the Complete Toolkit.
When we map out this whole spectrum of safety solutions, it becomes crystal clear that this isn't an either-or scenario. It's all connected. You combine alternative responders for those mental health crises, you use credible messengers for community-level de-escalation, you leverage bids for commercial safety, and you back all of that up with a fully operational, fully staffed traditional police and court system. That is exactly how you successfully restore a city's capacity to actually keep its citizens safe. Every single tool has a very specific mechanical function in this engine.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on for your own community. The next time you see those alarming headlines about rising crime, try to look past the usual political noise. Ask yourself, does your city actually have a crime problem, or does it simply have a capacity problem that's just waiting to be fixed?